Welcome to another edition of Straight Shooting Sports Talk. I'm your host, Dujane Bland. We got some interesting topics today that we're going to get right into. Definitely going to talk some NFL today. And it's very interesting on where the Redskins have come when it comes to quarterbacks, when it comes to just how the organization is being run. Now, the Washington Redskins have had a quarterback in Kirk Cousins, who they drafted when Mike Shanahan was there, along with Robert Griffin III. And over the past two seasons, Kirk has done a pretty decent job as the Washington Redskins quarterback. This season, he finished throwing for about nearly 5,000 yards, and that's about 49-17 is the exact number. And they're in a dilemma now. Washington decided to take a gamble and go ahead and give Kirk Cousins the franchise tag. Give him a play in and play your best game, and we'll give you a contract kind of deal. Kirk also betted on himself, and he produced. There's only one problem, though. There's only one problem, and that is his tendency to throw ill-advised interceptions at the most inopportune time. And that's been the discussion since the end of the season for Washington Redskins fans. There are Kirk supporters, and then there are folks that really would like to see Cousins hit the bricks. Now, you can call it however you want to call it, but the bottom line is this guy has played in and given himself an opportunity to cash in for a pretty lucrative deal. Now, you can pay him a long-term deal and take your chances, or you can risk taking another chance and giving him a franchise tag. Now, realize this franchise tag, if you give it to him again, he can make upwards of $24 million in this upcoming season. But, as we all know, newly hired GM John Lynch is a 49ers GM there, and it has been very well covered and noted that Kyle Shanahan is the guy that they would like to see to be their head coach in San Francisco. Now, we also know that Kyle Shanahan has ties to Kirk Cousins, as he was the offensive coordinator when he was here. Now, if you're the Washington Redskins, you have this quarterback, you're sold but not sold. Now, and that's probably not just in the coach's room, but it's definitely among the fans. Some are sold and some are not sold. You could lock this guy up and really end all of this search that the Washington Redskins have been in the last several years, the conundrum of having a decent quarterback and make him your franchise guy. Or, because of the money is concerned, you could listen to offers. And I'll point you to this article here written by my colleague, Lake Lewis Jr. You can find his work at redskinswire.usatoday.com. And he wrote this great piece on a scenario that would give that the San Francisco 49ers could offer the second round pick, overall pick in this year's draft to the Washington Redskins, along with a third-round pick for Kirk Cousins. Now, this is all if Kyle Shanahan goes here, whatever, there may be some interest. And there's not just the 49ers in need of a quarterback. It's just an ideal spot for a team that could be receiving a coach that really knows a guy like Kirk Cousins. Now, we know the Broncos are in need of a quarterback. And unlike Romo, Kirk is a lot younger than him. And that could be a scenario where this could put Washington in a scenario where they could potentially get some draft picks. That would put them, if they were to, according to this scenario that Lake puts out, if they got the number 2 pick from San Francisco, they would have number 2 and number 17 in the first round. And then they could pick the best available player on the board. Then they could take their number 17 pick, possibly, and address that hole left by Kirk Cousins and potentially shop for a quarterback. Now, we all know that the Patriots have Jimmy Garoppolo there, and he is going to be available. And he sat behind Tom Brady for the last few years here, had to come in and play for him a little bit in those first 4 games, along with a guy named Brissett. So you could potentially, I'm not saying that they would accept that 17th overall pick in the first round, but you could potentially get a signal caller in Jimmy Garoppolo to take Kirk Cousins' spot. He's a younger cat. Garoppolo's 25. Cousins is 29. Now, in football years, and for locking up a franchise guy, he's on the closer end of 30. So, what you say, 5 years potentially. Some quarterbacks play older or longer, to over 36. Some do not. So you could look at having a possibility of shopping this guy, getting some picks, and you could get a younger quarterback. In this scenario, you could get a Jimmy Garoppolo who's 25. You could bring down your cap number, get more money, and a guy like Kirk Cousins, which I believe, I don't think he sees anything less than $25 million a year. And I think that's fair, given the fact that when you look at the body of work in big games against winning teams, he doesn't tend to do well and tends to put the ball in the opponent's hands at the most inopportune times in those big moments. He has yet to show up for those big moments. And that can be used as a leverage piece as well for the Washington Redskins. But you don't want to break your cap when there's obviously other needs that the Redskins have. Now, I'm interested to hear what you fans think about that, especially Redskins fans and football fans alike. But I think that is a high possibility. And if the offer is right, if you're Scott McCloughan and you can get more football players, bring your cap number down, and that potential and that ability to have a guy like a Jimmy Garoppolo is there, you might pull the trigger on that. Now, I'm no Jay Cutler fan, but that dude's out there too. He's no franchise guy, but he's a stopgap guy. But I don't think the Washington Redskins want to get into this thing of stopgap quarterbacks. I mean, haven't you Redskins fans seen enough of those stopgap quarterbacks? Just filling in time until we draft one or pluck one from somewhere. Redskins haven't been the organization that hasn't been that good at doing that. So it'd have to be a strategical move. It'd have to be a smart move it'd have to be one that would make sense overall for the team, because at the end of the day, the last thing that the Redskins need or don't need is to set back this franchise even more. I think many would think that the trade given to go up and get RG3 was a franchise setback, especially how that turned out. Fortunate enough, Mike Shanahan did not leave the cupboard bare for the Washington Redskins, leaving behind Kirk Cousins as well in that draft, picking him up and having him available for this squad. Again, it sounds nice, but it is risky. And it's unfortunate the Washington Redskins have put themselves in this position, but they bet on Kirk playing himself into a contract, and he did that. The good thing is that you can franchise him another year, but there's scenarios that go along with that. He could hold out. He could not show up for training camp. And then how does your team look when they roll out? And I don't think Kirk is a guy who can miss training camp. Then if you give him a contract, is he going to ask for more than what he is worth? And do you overpay because you're afraid of possibly being in this quarterback conundrum again and on the search for another QB? But a great article, and something that is going to be interesting as we get further and further down the line, closer and closer to the draft. And once this coaching slot here in San Francisco gets filled, then the ball starts rolling, then the communication. We'll see if the 49ers talk to the Washington Redskins about Kirk Cousins. And I don't know, man, if the price is right. You might have to pull the trigger. They're a team that's desperately looking for a quarterback. So we'll see how this all plays out. Now this year, the Saints, along with a few other teams, did not fare so well. We did get another fan question in from our fan here. That's Straight Shooting Sports Talk, Lisa again. And she posed a great question about Sean Payton, of the New Orleans Saints. And if it was time to change the head coaching position there in New Orleans. And I tell you what, when you look at the New Orleans Saints over the last 3 years, you have to say Sean Payton has been consistent. 7-9 has been their record since 2014. He has had more winning seasons than not, though. And yes, the past 3 years they have been below 500 at 7-9. But I'm going to throw out some statistics here that show that not so much of Sean Payton needs to change. He needs help from the front office to get the proper coaches in there and to make the proper decisions as far as players are concerned, to have the proper defense to be able to be coupled with that offense. And if you go back to 2014, this is when Rob Ryan was the defensive coordinator. They were 28th in total points scored against. That's 424 points. That's 26.5 points a game. They were 9th in points scored that year, scoring 25-1. Notice something? See, your defense has got to stop somebody. You look at 2015, another 7-9 season, a season that was plagued with a few injuries. But you want to know where they were in points scored against? You guessed it, dead last. 32nd in the league in points scored against. Not good. Not good at all. This year, this past season in 2016, they were 31st. Now they're scoring 29-3 a game. They were second in points scored. 2015, they were 8th in points scored. To me, if you're in the top 10 in points scored, your offense is doing more than enough to win ball games. More than enough to win ball games. Problem is, your defense is not stopping a soul. Now, is that on coaching and Sean Payton? I don't think so. And I wrote an article about this earlier this year, dealing with this team and Sean Payton. And the fact of the matter is that his front office needs to give him some help. There's been a lot of moves made that have put penalties against the cap, that have caused them to not be able to get the right mix of free agents and draft picks in there on the defense to be able to bolster that defense, mainly in the secondary. They made a great pick this year, picking defense. Now, he got hurt. He was able to play later on in the year, but he can get a full season out of him, and they can get some things going in that front seven. Now you just got to get your secondary to cover a lot better, and that's where their issue has been. I personally think Dennis Allen is not a bad defensive coordinator. This year, I believe there was like 13 or more players that were on IR, and most of them being on the defensive side of the ball. And they lost 2 or 3 big corners that were playmakers for them. That's not good for you. Another thing, depth was a problem as far as players being hurt. They lost depth on the defensive side of the ball. That's an issue. That Sheldon Rankins is who they drafted. When he did come in, he made a difference. But they're going to have to get better. Ownership is going to have to get better on how they spend money, making sure they're not making cuts and taking on bad contracts that cause a team to have a lot of dead money. And then it hurts your salary cap because you're paying for people that aren't there, and you can't continue to have that flow of quality players because you don't have the money to pay those types of players. It's always the right mix. Can't be too old, and you can't always be too young. Now, some people have, broken that mold of being very young and gotten away with it. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's always best to have the right mixture, and it's always best to have the ability to have some type of depth, but your depth can't be full-time players when they're young and inexperienced. And that's really what it has boiled down to for the New Orleans Saints, especially at the cornerback position. Other than Bro, no one's really been consistently out there because they've been hurt. And then now you're playing with your depth, your backups, and not saying they're not great players. They're just not starting material yet. And they're getting torched on the outside and in the secondary area. And that's where they've been getting picked apart. Hence why last year, 32nd in the league on defense. This year, 31st in the league on defense. That's not good for any squad. And it's really hurting Sean Payton's offense, who really did an excellent job this year of putting up points, 29.3 points a game. Second in the league. But it doesn't matter when you can't stop a soul. That has to improve. I think, honestly, when you look at Sean Payton, he has to stay. And I think he stays for at least another, as long as he wants to stay, honestly, he can stay there. this isn't a drop off on his part. This is something where ownership, Mickey Loomis, these guys have to make better decisions to help their head coach, Sean Payton, be more successful, and they can continue and have an opportunity to be in the playoffs on a regular basis. That brings me to Indianapolis head coach and whether this guy is going to stay around. They did go out and hire a new GM in Ballard. And he says he's staying with his guy. He's going to stay. No changes at the head coaching position. And I wouldn't expect that. I mean, honestly, why would you change out a head coach right now when really at this moment in time, the problem really was looming from the head coach and the GM not getting along in a great fashion, right? So you don't fix what's not broken as far as your head coach is concerned. But if they don't produce a winning season, especially in a division really that hasn't been that great. I mean, you look at the standings in that division in the AFC South, and Houston wins that division at 9-7. And it wasn't a pretty 9-7. Everybody was right there. Indianapolis Colts right there. And they have to improve on defense. But Pagano definitely has done an excellent job so far with what he's done, what he's had to work with, really. When you look at the defense, look at those things, they're really not that great on defense. Early, they were getting torched earlier in the year. Offensive line wasn't protecting Andrew Luck that well early in the year either. There's some pieces that they need. And that stems from front office again. Got to have a front office that's working with the head coach. And I understand because the coaches are seeing they're the ones coaching up the players. They're the ones that are out there calling the plays, et cetera, et cetera. They're in the forefront of everything. They usually get the brunt, just sort of like the quarterback gets all the praise when everything's good, gets all the blame when bad things happen. And it's not always his fault. And I think it's the same thing with coaching. Coaches depend so much on the front office, the GMs, being able to work as a collective, cohesive unit, and then giving them the proper pieces to put out on the field to produce a quality product. I mean, we all know you can't shine up a hardened piece of poop and expect it to be a diamond. That doesn't work that way. Never has. And it's the same thing in football. You don't have the right collective pieces out there on that football field. You can't expect any coach to go out and to make diamonds out of crap when you're handing him a pile of crap. And to be quite honest with you, Pagano, and just as we said, Sean Payton, haven't not been given quality pieces to work with collectively on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball, mainly in the trenches. Well, we all know defense, you need pressure on the quarterback, you need consistent pressure. You don't have to have a great secondary. You don't have to have the best people. But if you have quality guys who can get consistent pass rush, be disruptive, that makes your secondary look better. But the more and more that they're over 7 seconds running around trying to cover somebody, well, somebody's going to be open if that guy has 7 seconds to find someone. And Andrew Luck, granted, I believe he is who he is. He throws interceptions, but he makes great plays. But he wasn't protected very well at all, especially early in the season. And you can't expect a quarterback with no running game, which is a problem, to be able to go out consistently week after week after week and just throw the football, unless you're Aaron Rodgers, of course. Unless you're that team. And you probably can throw the Patriots in there, but, they change and move and shake with the wind. Sometimes they can go out and pass all day, and sometimes they hit you with the run. But Indy's not that team. And that's a wide open division. So, again, 2 coaches didn't have so great years. Sean Payton, 3rd season of 7-9 and below 500. I don't think they should be on the hot seat. I think really the people that are on the hot seat in Indy addressed that problem by bringing in Ballard as their new GM, and hopefully he can get a handle on things in that regard as far as player personnel and bringing in the right bodies to help Pagano. And for Sean Payton, his GM has to get on board, make better decisions, get some players in there, get some depth in there, and they have to, every team deals with injury, but they have to be able to do a better job in giving their coaches something to work with out there on that field to be able to produce a winning product, especially in the NFC South, a tough division. A tough division this year. The Falcons did run away with it this year, but there were times where this division was up for grabs, and they had an opportunity. Well, at least Tampa Bay had an opportunity. Saints, on the other hand, had an opportunity maybe early in the season. But if your defense is going to be 31st in the league, there's not much you can accomplish there. Well, that's it for our show, ladies and gentlemen. It's been nice conversating with you on these topics. Again, thank Lisa again for her great topic, her great question. Thank you for participating and listening to this show, and thank all of you for listening to this show. If you want to send in questions that you'd like to hear talked about or discussed, you can shoot us an email at straightshootingst@gmail.com. That's straightshootingst@gmail.com. Okay, got my tongue. If you want to get at me on social media, you can get at me on Twitter at NotBlame21. Be glad to shop with you there. We're going to get into the Super Bowl topics, and like I said, we got all week. You're going to hear about it all week. And to me, it's just beating a dead horse. I don't like making predictions early in the week, Super Bowl week. It's not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, we've seen these teams all week, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more as the week goes on. So stay tuned to the shows for that. And again, we thank you. And this has been another edition of Straight Shooting Sports Talk.